Right, good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started. We've got a few people still joining, but I'm conscious of time. So what we'll do is we'll start the webinar. We will be recording it as well, so we'll send you out a link to listen to the recording after the event, so that if you want to share it with your colleagues or anyone else, please do feel free to. So, good morning. My name is Andy Wilcox. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Imprivata. I'm joined today on this webinar by my colleagues Dries and Adam, who I'll very briefly let introduce themselves. Dries, over to you.
Good morning. I'm Dries Gelfeld. I'm the sales engineer for the channel, and I assume that most of you should be knowing me.
And Adam?
Good morning, everyone. Adam Hayward, responsible for sales engineering team, the pre-sales team in International. As with Dries, hopefully some of you know me at least anyway. You know me better after the call.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And as I say, I'm Andy Wilcox, Senior Product Marketing Manager for our international markets, and some people may know me, some people may not, but I'm going to be running the webinar today. And the purpose of this webinar is to give you, our partners, an update on more on the product side of what we do in Imprivata, to give you some information about new developments we've made in the product, new features and functionality that will be of benefit to our customers, and to hopefully keep you informed of the progress we're making within the product and our suite of products that we sell. So without further ado, I will get going. So today, in the agenda today, we're going to cover off some of the more recent updates within the latest versions of OneSign and Confirm ID, and that will include our mobile solution as well, and Confirm ID for clinical workflow, so a little bit of information about what's new in those products. We'll also touch on the G3 appliance, which is available now and is an essential part of some of the new functionality that we've introduced, and is a requirement to take advantage of some of that new functionality. We'll also cover off some of the new features and things that we're developing that are going to be coming soon in the next few months. I'll also touch on some updates around pricing and different updates to the license pricing for some of our products. And then finally, I'll just talk about a few of the marketing initiatives we've been running in the past few months that you can take advantage of as partners. So let's start with some updates around OneSign. So we, as a business, we do updates to our core products approximately once a quarter. So we have a fairly frequent update schedule that brings new features and functionality. And some of the key things that we've introduced over the past 18 months include the new user interface for OneSign, which you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, which provides a much more kind of appealing visual look to OneSign, and kind of gives it a little bit more of a look and feel that is closely aligned to Windows 10, which we know a lot of customers are moving to. In terms of Windows 10 itself, we've been introducing support for Windows 10 over several of the more recent versions of OneSign, and we now support Windows 10 version 1809 and 1903 within the product. And to be clear, we do support Windows 10 on the older appliance, the G2 appliance, for OneSign version 6.0 only. And then for the G3 appliance, it's all versions from OneSign version 6.0 and on. So customers who are migrating to Windows 10 can feel confident that they have the support within OneSign to make that move. So now I'm going to hand over to Dries and just let him talk through some of the more recent versions of OneSign that we've released this year, and some of the features and functionality that we've introduced within them. Dries, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm now going to start with version 6.2, and one of the main or the most interesting features that we have in that new features that we have in that 6.2 release, for me at least, is the Imprivata integrated run as. Basically, what we are solving with that feature is that applications that are using the integrated Windows authentication, So that is, so automatically are taking the Windows identity when they are launched. We had a problem when when we were using these applications in a kiosk workstation because they would grab the generic user while we would love these applications to take the one-sign user. We have solved this with the Imprivata integrated run as solution, where we are basically creating specific icons on the desktop and using an Imprivata launcher for this application, where we are injecting the one-sign user rather than the Windows user. We also have established a zero downtime restore. It's not really zero downtime because you need to restore something, but it's basically when we are restoring, we make the one-time enterprise as quickly as available as possible. So we are firstly going to restore the users and then we are going to restore the user policies, computer policies, and application profiles. And only after that, when the appliance or the enterprise is available again, we are going to continue to restore all the audit data. But this leads to a lot shorter downtime when we are doing a restore. We also added the user interface automation probe for Java applications. The user interface automation probe was until now only to be used for Internet Explorer applications. We modified that probe also to use it for Java applications, which gives us the possibility to work with 32-bit and 64-bit Java runtimes without having the necessity to use the Java Access Bridge. We have also added provide the embedded support for Citrix XenApp published applications. And as Andy had already mentioned, we have also added support for Windows 10 1809. Within the version 6.3, as well for one-time as for Confirm ID, we had one very important thing for the international market, and that is the API integration with InterSystems Track Care support. InterSystems Track Care is one of the EMRs that is used in a lot of countries in the international market, and we also have now API integrations for signing workflows and witness workflows within this package. We also added support for Windows 10 1903. We updated the VDA support to recent versions of Citrix and VMware. And for the Arabic world, we also added Arabic language support into that version. Within OneSign 7, which we released roughly 2 weeks ago, we added one also very important feature, and this is the web single sign-on. So we have now basically 3 ways of enabling single sign-on for applications. We have the old single sign-on based on screen recognition. We have since release 6.2 that IFX run as feature. And then we have now also the web single sign-on. So we are delivering single sign-on based on SAML authentication. Important to know about the web single sign-on is that this is part of the existing SSO license. So end users don't need or customers don't need to buy additional licenses. No, this is just standard. This is part of the maintenance fee that they are paying, and if they're upgrading, this is just part to OneSign 7. This is part of the SSO license they have already bought. For these web single sign-on to be able to show these kind of things, the enterprise needs to be connected to the cloud. And to get that enterprise connected to the clouds, all the partners can contact me, or the technical people at least can contact me, and then we can set up a time to have a small WebEx so that we can connect the enterprise to the cloud, so you will be able to demonstrate the web single sign-on using SAML. We've also made some small improvements to Imprivata Improve ID embedded endpoints. So until now, we were using inactivity timers in the closest Windows desktop available to the endpoints, which for Prove ID embedded devices was or the full VDI or the published desktop. Well, we changed that, and we implemented also the inactivity timers as we did on Windows desktops. We also implemented these inactivity timers on the Prove ID embedded endpoints. And we also added an offline mode to these Prove ID embedded agents. So if these agents are not capable to connect to the appliances, the user will be able to authenticate in an offline mode if he at least has already used that computer and is available in the offline cache. Also, a new feature that is currently limited available is secure walkaway. Some of our older partners might remember the old secure walkaway solution with the camera mounted on the screen. We've abandoned that idea a while ago because these cameras were no longer supported on Windows 10. But we replaced that with a low-frequency Bluetooth dongle, and that dongle is basically making a connection to an Imprivata ID app on the smartphone of the user at the moment that the user is authenticating. So this is not the first step of the authentication. Firstly, the user still needs to tap in with a PIN code or something like that, and at that moment, over Bluetooth, we are connecting to the Imprivata ID. If the user is then walking away, the Bluetooth connection gets too weak, and we are automatically going to lock that computer. If that same user is coming back near the computer and that Bluetooth dongle can redetect the Imprivata ID app on the phone of the user, that workstation will automatically be unlocked. At this moment, it is there's a limited availability because we are waiting basically on the manufacturer of the Bluetooth dongles to deliver these dongles to us with the latest firmware available for these dongles. We also made enhancements to the multi-user desktop workflow. So as you probably know, we have the capability of setting up a multi-user functionality, which looks a bit like the switch user functionality in Windows 10, although that this MUD workflow is enabling us to control the amount of different sessions that we have side by side. We made a significant improvement which will be visible for a user that is locking his workstation and is afterwards coming back. He will obtain his session immediately. If another user is coming to that workstation and we need to switch from one user to another, everything stays as it was. But if it's the same user is returning, he's getting into his desktop immediately, while in the past we needed some connection time, and so we enhanced that workflow quite good. The last thing that we added for OneSign 7 has nothing to do with the functionalities within OneSign, but has to do with the platform that we are supporting. Until now, we had appliances supporting the virtual appliances were supported on a ESX environment or a Hyper-V environment, and we are now added also the Nutanix support. And I think I'm switching them back to Andy. Oh no, the mobile device access was still for me. Sorry, my fault. So basically, mobile device access is already part of the solution since version 6.0 or 6.1, but as we still wanted to cover it as a separate item and not just as one of the things in the releases, because it is a new solution that we are bringing. What we are seeing is that doctors and nurses in hospitals are more and more starting to use mobile devices. But these devices can be quite expensive, and so a hospital is only buying a limited set of them and not a mobile device per user. which means that these devices will be shared, which means, of course, that we will have the same issues on these devices as we have on the computers. They were just standing open. A user was opening an application, authenticating within that application, not logging out. The next user was taking the device and started working with it. This was, of course, again, leading to the fact that you had no traceability at all. So we brought more or less the same solution as we have developed for computers to these mobile devices. If I can we go back a slide, please? So basically the device is secured by an Imprivata agent. With a tap of the badge using NFC, the user is unlocking the device and is having the possibility to launch these applications. And within these applications, we will then deliver a single sign-on into these applications. We have tested this solution. Next slide, please. We have tested this solution with several devices. Although that basically Android 6 and NFC is what is required, and Android 6 or more recent, and NFC is required. Although for the tested devices, we know that their flavor of Android is working correctly with our solutions. We also have tested this or developed some integrations to deliver single sign-on with a list of applications. This list can also be found in the partner portal when you go and look for the mobile device access solution. We deliver single sign-on with integrations, but we can also create single sign-on profiles. To create these single sign-on profiles, please contact the local sales engineer or have a look in our learning management system where, for example, we have posted some training material on how to profile applications on mobile devices. And I'm now turning it back to Andy, I think.
You are. Thank you, Dries. Yeah, so thanks for that summary of the latest updates that we've made in the product. All of those updates relate to version 6.1 and 6.2 onwards, which are all dependent on the G3 appliance. So I was just going to kind of introduce the G3 appliance and kind of give a bit of context to what this brings to the customers, to end users. So it's our latest generation of appliance. It's a virtual appliance only, and some of the core benefits it brings. I mean, first of all, it's the latest versions of the database, the operating system, and security patches that exist on it. So it's a more secure, more hardened appliance than previous versions. And really what we're trying to do is move the appliance on so that we can provide latest technology that meets the customer's evolving needs. As I said, enhance security and stability of the appliance, and leverage the new versions of Confirm ID and One Sign that we're bringing out. So every version we release from now on will only be supported on the G3 appliance. And we'll get on to the end of life shortly, but we will be end of lifing older appliances versions as we move forward. So it is a relatively straightforward process to migrate from the older G2 appliances to the G3. And Dries is just going to give a quick overview of what that means to you as partner and what that will mean to customers in terms of making that migration.
So the release 6.0, as Adam said, will be the last release that is available on the G2 appliances. And if customers are wanting to use newer features, they will need to switch to the G3 appliances. The appliance itself is not part of the maintenance contract. So each customer will need to buy, first of all, new appliances. Once they have bought the new appliances, basically, the migration process is very simple and easy to perform, although you need to test everything, of course, as you would do with a normal upgrade that you're executing. How will the migration take place? We will firstly take a an enterprise export of the existing G2 enterprise. We will then, based on this enterprise export, build a new G3 enterprise on temporary IP addresses in the same subnet. We can then do the tests against these temporary IP addresses, and if all the tests are working and everything is looking fine, we will then power off the existing G2 appliances, and on the G3 appliances we will hit a button, switch to production, and at that moment basically these new G3 appliances are switching from their temporary IP addresses to the old IP addresses of the G2 appliances, which makes that you don't need to modify anything on the endpoints. This was a quick summary on how the process goes. There is a complete, very detailed documentation available in the partner portal, and within the G3 migration guide, you find everything step by step. The most important thing to not create issues at a customer is to validate that they are running the versions of OneSign and other firmware that is connecting to the appliances that is able to connect to over TLS 1.2. So, for example, all agents older as release 5.2 will certainly not be capable of communicating over TLS 1.2. There are agents within the 5.2 range, 5.3 range, and 5.4 range, and even 5.5 range that are not capable of doing that. By default, within that migration guide, we have also specified which registry keys needs to be implemented on 5.2 and higher versions to force them to connect to these G3 appliances over TLS 1.2. This is very important because otherwise, after the upgrade, these agents will not be able to communicate and will be consuming offline cache, which is giving you a limited time to upgrade all the agents on these endpoints. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Dries. So on screen now is our product lifestyle matrix, which details when different versions of our product go end of life. And I mean, it was important to put this in context in that a lot of organizations, particularly national and public sector organizations, have requirements that they use versions of software that are fully supported and are, you know, in an active maintenance or active support environment. So as we can see from here, versions of OneSign from 5.4 and below are now all end of life. So all of our customers should be on version 5.5 or higher, and version 5.5 is going to go end of life at some point next year, on or after March 2020. So it's important that customers have a plan to move forward to the latest versions, not just to take advantage of new features, but to ensure that the version they're running is fully supported. And that applies to the appliances as well. So G2 physical appliances are now end of life, and they went end of life in April this year. For the virtual version of the G2 appliance, we have an end of life set for December the 31st of next year. So customers have just over a year now to really migrate to that latest version to ensure that they're going to be in continued support of the version of the product they're running. And you know, this gives a very clear roadmap to where the product is and where the product's going and what versions you need to be on. This is maintained on our partner portal and support portal. And also, I think Dries mentioned it earlier, the supported configurations document is also listed there, which details what applications, what devices, what's supported within the product for each version, and what customers can utilize within the product. So it's important that you review those documents on the portal and ensure you know what is supported and what versions of the product are in support and maintenance and going end of life. So I'm going to hand over to Adam now to talk a little bit about some of the new functionality that we're introducing in the next few months. I think Dries has already touched a little bit on the Microsoft Run As, but Adam's going to give it a little bit more of an overview of what is coming and what the Microsoft functionality that will support is. Before we do that, I just need to draw your attention to our safe harbor message. This is because we're going to be talking about some functionality that is still in development or still being developed, and as a consequence, it may or may not end up in a release version of the product. So we just need to draw your attention to this before we talk about the next section. So Adam, I will hand over to you and let you take the floor for this bit.
Thank you, Andy. Hello, everyone. So, and thank you, Dries, as well. So I'm going to, as Andy says, go into a little bit more detail on some of the Microsoft aspects and talk about some of the features that have recently been added and some of the features that are coming. So one of the things, as Dries mentioned, that came in the latest release of OneSign just a few weeks ago was support for single sign-on to cloud-based applications, or SaaS, any of the other terminology out there. Essentially, what we're performing, the functionality we're performing here is a SAML 2.0 identity provider. It enables the users to extend their single sign-on experience from the traditional desktop apps that we've always dealt with. We've moved on to the next slide already. To deal with the desktop apps that we've already traditionally worked with out to cloud-based applications. And because it's SAML, the way this works is a password-less single sign-on experience. So it maintains the security going forward as well. The solution provided here is not just about access through to the cloud from the existing desktop workstations that we're all familiar with, but if you have clinicians who are on the road, who are accessing information from home, through the use of our Confirm ID remote access solution, this is also integrated into the cloud solution here. So when they then go and access these cloud applications, they can be challenged for two-factor authentication through the Imprivata ID app that is already out there and widely in use out there. Moving on to the challenges that this addresses, typically when you're trying to access these cloud applications, particularly from a kiosk workstation, you will run into a series of challenges that the cloud-based single sign-on experience is operating in the context of the generic Windows user and not the logged-in OneSign user, if you like. So this creates a less than optimal single sign-on experience for the clinician at the workstation, and essentially not friendly. And if you click on next. So this essentially fixes that, if you like. Both on private workstations and shared workstations, the clinicians, the users will get a consistent experience. And I guess, as we all know, a clinician just wants to click on a button and get into the application, and the details of how that happens, they're not interested in, basically. So it needs to be seamless for them. So this extends what we traditionally know through the on-premise applications through to cloud, and actually enables a hybrid environment where if you have customers that are migrating to the cloud and they're in that transition period, then we can enable that hybrid cloud experience as well in that environment. So we click next, Andy. So I'll come back to the terminology here, but this is seamless SSO, essentially, which is used in the Microsoft world. And prior to the web single sign-on with kiosk workstations, users attempting to access Azure cloud services or Office 365 cloud services, for example, from shared clinical workstations may again have had a challenge. And as Dries mentioned earlier, through the release of the feature we had called ASX Run As, which is the tool that's installed with the agent to address this. Essentially, what this means is that the clinicians or other non-clinical users, and I'll come on to that in a minute, can access these Azure cloud services without being challenged to log in as before. So previously on a kiosk workstation, there would have been the Azure application would have seen the user's request coming in the context of that generic kiosk desktop user that was signed in on the workstation and not the one sign user that's managing single sign-on to the desktop applications. So the use of ASX Run As will essentially address that by logging in the user's context as their AD user before the application is launched and connected to Office 365 stroke Azure. So again, bringing a seamless single sign-on experience. And on the next slide, this means that they can essentially address, move forward, Andy. They can essentially address many of these productivity applications out there in a combination, not just with applications in Office 365 stroke Azure, but also the multitude of other cloud-based applications out there. So and what this in effect also unwraps, if you like, for our customer base is more relevance for the non-clinical users. So many of the cloud applications out there, for example, may be more administration functions, day-to-day type applications and not necessarily clinical applications. And so these solutions can actually open up that for the non-clinical users and essentially extend the benefits and experience of the single sign-on solutions we bring to the whole healthcare organization, not just the clinicians out there. So if we go on to the next one, a little bit of, and I'll try and clear up some terminology for you here. So the graphic at the bottom here is essentially representing those clinicians at a kiosk workstation for this, in this case, as we've talked about that so much. And the traditional on-premise single sign-on is what we all know and understand and have enjoyed that OneSign delivers for many years now. So if you click again for the next animation, the terminology seamless single sign-on using the functionality that Dries mentioned, ASX Run As, addresses the experience challenge, if you like, for Windows Azure applications. And when we say Windows Azure, because of the way this is implemented, it's pretty much any application out there. In theory, it should be any application out there. So really, it's just a statement of Windows Azure applications in a generic term there. And lastly, if we click again, Andy, the web single sign-on through the SAML 2.0 IDP functionality that we've released brings that experience to those other web-based applications out there. And as you saw on previous slides, some of those may simply be what we're using here now, WebEx. Some of them may be the ServiceNow ticketing system or ADP for payroll, etc. So it opens up the horizons beyond the scope of the traditional on-premise out to those cloud environments. And because it does that in this cloud hybrid mode, means that it can support the transition from where the customers are now to where they desire to go to in the future out there. Next slide. So what are we driving towards? So in the red box in the middle, essentially, we're driving towards a platform, if you like, that enables the single sign-on aspects, the multi-factor authentication aspects, the access aspects, and on the left here you see provisioning or identity management aspects for essentially a wider user community. So I've mentioned earlier non-clinical users. I kind of inferred earlier external users in the context of clinical users working from home, but potentially that could be anyone with a identity in the system. On a multitude of devices, and these we continue to extend out. So we're familiar with shared workstations, we're familiar with dedicated workstations. We become recently familiar with medical devices and mobile devices, but the scope of those continue to expand to other device types, other medical device types. So, things that you may see in the future, going back to that safe harbor slide, things like support for infusion pumps and other critical medical devices such as those. And in terms of locations, kind of inferred in the user statement, but not just on-premise in the hospital anymore, but broadening it out to people on the road, working from home, and even those remote clinics out there. And again, for the traditional on-premise applications, going to cloud and using mobile to address those, using Confirm ID remote access for the multi-factor authentication, using some of the technologies that we've recently introduced to Seamless SSO, Web SSO, to achieve broader access out there. And in the provisioning space, I should put in a honourable mention for our identity governance solution, which I'm sure many of you have heard about if you follow our press out there. So this is a solution that we're progressively and in a managed way rolling out to our marketplaces. This has already started in North America. We're looking to bring that to international in a controlled way in the next year. It'll probably start in the regions where we have the core of our personnel, so probably in the UK. And then as we build out our teams and resources to support an identity governance solution in our marketplace, we'll look to rolling that out to other countries and other regions as we progress. But the reason why it's mentioned here in the context of OneSign, if you like, is because it does relate to OneSign. It can be used to manage the identities in OneSign, to manage the user single sign-on credentials in OneSign. It can also be managed to tie into the traceability aspects of what users are doing that OneSign sees, because we have the functionality on the desktop and things like that out there. So that's a key piece, if you like. Other places where it extends, there's in multi-factor authentication, there's a little future box here. You've heard about our Microsoft announcements. That's not just a one-off marketing thing. We are working together with Microsoft to lay out a strategy and a roadmap for both addressing gaps in the Microsoft marketplace as well as extending our solutions to integrate better together. So again, referring back to the safe harbor slide, you can infer from that multi-factor authentication and Azure, so access going on and work being investigated there. In terms of access, there's other things we can do with potentially do in the Microsoft Azure space with Windows virtual desktops, for example, and bringing those into the fold and extending that whole ecosystem out to the cloud. So I think from what you've seen from Dries' and the presentation so far is there's been over the last year or so, there's been a lot of things added to the product in a managed and progressive way that addresses various aspects. In effect, it's taken in that relatively short period of time our solution from the traditional on-premise single sign-on out to cloud and hybrid cloud. And there's more we can bring to that and take that forward. As ever, we're always listening for input, and we try and do what the market asks us to do in a controlled manner. So if you have input, please let us know. I'll pass you back to Andy.
Thank you, Adam. Yes, I can't add anything more to that. It's yeah, I think we've seen a lot of great developments over the last 18 months in the product, and we continue to move forward. And the Microsoft relationship is going to be a fantastic thing for our customers, for OneSign, and the functionality it brings. I'll just very briefly touch on pricing updates, because as we come to the end of 2019 and move into 2020, we will be introducing some small changes to our price lists across our international markets. For those that weren't aware, in October we made some changes, a small change to the medical device access license on the price lists, which we reduced the medical device access for carts by 30%. So for those that don't know, the way we license medical devices is on a per device basis, and we have two separate licenses, one for medical carts and one for vital signs at the minute. So we have adjusted the price to reflect market feedback, and we will continue to monitor that and provide updates if we do make any further changes. From the 1st of January 2020, we're going to be rolling out a 6% price increase across all of our international price lists relating purely to our Imprivata OneSign license. So this covers our SSO AM and individual SSO and AM licenses, our VDA license, and our OneSpan license. Any other licenses that aren't explicitly mentioned on here aren't addressed or aren't changed and will retain the price that they currently are at. So that's particularly, I'm referencing Confirm ID for clinical workflows there. And then finally, I mentioned medical device access, the vital signs license. The previous promotional pricing that we had against that license now becomes standard. So that's a cheaper price than it was initially introduced at, that we were holding as a promo. That now becomes standard. So all of the price lists will become available in the partner portal. So do review them, and if you have any queries, please do come back to us and ask them. And then finally, I just wanted to touch very briefly on some of the work we do from a marketing perspective to create content that is more relevant to our international market. So we've been on a program over the last 2 years of trying to bring market sensitive content over here, and not just market sensitive content in terms of what it says, but also the languages that we translate it into. So we now have content that talks about the value of the Imprivata solutions, which covers English language, Dutch, German, and French. We've got brochures and corporate brochures and more kind of product orientated brochures that are localized into relevant languages within the international markets. A lot of our data sheets have now been translated into German and French, Swedish, Dutch, so are available for you to use as partners whenever you need them. We've also had a good selection of case studies from some of our key customers across the UK, Australia, Ireland, and we continue to want to develop further case studies with customers as well. So we're always interested in hearing about success where our customers, your customers, have had success with OneSign and are willing to talk about it. We'd love to do more of these because I think they represent a great advert for how well our solutions support what goes on in a hospital. And then in terms of other things we've been doing in marketing, well, we've done product updates, a little bit like this one we're doing for you as partners, but for customers more recently, and they're covering the updates in version 6.2 and 6.3. We've also done a Dutch webinar around GDPR and some of the challenges in being compliant with GDPR and how we can support that. And also one covering our solutions that we've done for the Middle East. Moving forward, we would like to do these product update webinars for customers, maybe quarterly. For you as partners, we would like to try and do it roughly twice a year, so that you're always aware of what's new in the product, what we're doing to support the product and the customers going forward. We'd also like to potentially do some webinars talking about specific functionality. So I know Dries talked a little bit about InterSystems track care support earlier on. And we think this is some great functionality that we've introduced. It's really going to be a benefit to any of those customers that are using track care. So at the point in time where we do organise a webinar, we will let you as partners know that and make you aware of that, so that you can invite customers onto the webinars and ensure that they get the latest information. So that kind of brings us to an end of the formal presentation. If there are any questions, we've got quite a few of the team online, so do feel free to ask them. We've got about 10 minutes left. You can unmute yourselves if you want to ask the question verbally, or type it in the chat box and we'll cover it off. I know there was one question just popped up there. So there's a question here about Windows 1909 support. Does anyone want to chime in on 1909 support?
Currently, we are not yet supporting Windows 1909, and I think that our product management has taken an official stance that we will always try to follow as quickly as possible to be compliant to these versions. And to be honest, I'm not any sure anymore whether it's 3 months or 6 months. I think it was 3 months that they were giving them as a target to follow on the releases. So 1909 plus 3 months, that would be the 1st of January, something in December, January. So probably the next release, 7.1 or 7.0 Service Pack 1, will be supporting 1909 normally, if at least we don't encounter strange things during qualifications.
I think 3 months was certainly the goal we wanted to get to for support. It's probably not quite at 3 months yet, but we're certainly moving down from 6 months to 3 months for supporting Windows 10 version. There's a question about our experience with mobile device access and Epic Rover. We do support Epic Rover within the mobile device access as an API level integration. We don't have any experience of it in Europe at the minute, but I do believe in the US there are it's been tested or piloted. So, and we might even have customers using it. So we can check on that. And if you need any actual kind of real world experience, we can see if we can provide that for you. But it's certainly a supported application within the product.
I'm fairly sure there are users out there with it. I can't name them off my cuff at the moment.
There's a question about OpenID Connect support coming to WebSSO. At the moment, I don't have an answer for that. We continue to evolve the product, and the release, version 7 release of WebSSO is our first iteration of the product, and it's one that we see as a fundamental core of the future of OneSign. So we would expect to see further improvements and developments to WebSSO as we move forward. But beyond that, I can't make any commitment to say, yes, it's definitely in the roadmap, and yes, it's definitely coming at this point in time.
I think on those sort of questions, it's not so much about the technology used to achieve single sign-on, but the application and the user experience that will drive those sorts of requests. So we're always looking at these technologies, but it's not necessarily technology for technology's sake. So if there are specific applications and needs, then please let us know.
Yeah. In the chat box, there's a fairly long question about SAML support.
Shall I handle it otherwise?
You want to take this one, Dries?
So at this moment, in the current version, we are not delivering a portal in which you can publish applications. So it's basically when you're addressing the application will redirect itself to Imprivata as the identity provider. And as I mentioned in this release, because this is really just the first release of what we will be delivering, as all products, things evolve. And at this moment, I cannot say whether it's on the roadmap, yes or no, but the product will certainly evolve. So we, and as we do with all these kind of features and enhancement, the IDs that you have within the partner portal or for customers within the support portal, there is an ID section in which you can post new IDs. You can promote or demote or vote at least for these IDs. And product management is indeed looking at these IDs and certainly at the most popular IDs to get them implemented as quickly as possible, if they at least fit in the vision that we have ourselves around our own products. I also see another question from Natal regarding improvements of reports to be more flexible. I think at this moment, the reports, we will still be working with standard reports as we have done over the past years. We have added reports because to enable you to search for on new functionalities, but we will never, at least I don't know, maybe while the product is evolving, but at this moment it's not on the roadmap to start building a business intelligence agent so that you can completely flexibly create your own reports. For these kind of things, what we do support and can support is all the existing reports can be scheduled and exported, and also all the audit data can be exported into flat files. These flat files or CSV files can then be uploaded into data mining tools, which will enable you to have that more flexible reporting that you're looking after. But at this moment, it's not on the roadmap to integrate these kind of things into the product, as we don't consider it probably as our core functionality.
Great. Thank you, Dries. Okay, so we're approaching the end of the hour for this. If there are any more questions, you've got a couple of minutes. Otherwise, do feel free to submit questions to us. I mean, we've got our partner team online today, Chris and Harry and Adam Tunstall. As ever, they're there to support you as partners and answer any questions. We value you very much as partners, and want to continue to support you. And like I said earlier, I think what we want to do is communicate updates to the product more frequently to you, so you're aware of changes and new functionality and new initiatives that we're doing within the product. So we would like to do these once every sort of 6 months to keep you abreast of things. I think we're all pretty much done on the questions by the looks of it. So if that's the end of the questions, then just to say thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's much appreciated taking some time out of your day to come and listen to us. Have a great day, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.